I'd like to invite Nick and Judi back to the stage, and then we'll get on to some questions.
Thank you. My question is for Nick. Nick, I think you said you had about 300 mils of rainfall a year. Is that correct? Could you just touch on your perennial pastures, particularly in summer? So you mentioned how you might go for 5 or 6 months without rain. That's not uncommon anymore. For those of us aspiring to establish perennial pastures, what period of the summer are you extending your green for? So are you seeing green throughout summer, or are you seeing it on the fringes, and for how long? What's the extension in your green, in the ground, your living, growing plants throughout the year?
That photo that I showed you, that was at the end of that 6-month period. So that was probably, but it was before the break of the season. So might have been around kind of March or something like that. So they had been growing actively all summer long during that whole period, and they'd only been established, I think, for 2 years, that stand there. So extremely tough, really, really resilient. So in our situation, in our environment, they're a real game changer.
Thanks, Nick. And that you said was Rhodes and Panic, is that correct?
Yep, Rhodes and Panic. There's a few different varieties in there. Some of the Panic grasses like the heavier soil, and some of them will do better in the lighter country. Some of them have better feed quality than others, but again, we're going after diversity. We want as much as we can get in there. Chicory favours some soil types. In some, it will keep recruiting and hang around for years, and other areas you'll see it go gangbusters for maybe 2 or 3 years and then almost totally disappear. And lucerne, likewise, we've got areas that the lucerne's taken over and is dominating. So having to plug more diversity back into those stands, and other areas that it doesn't seem to perform well. Again, diversity is the key there. If you throw out lots of diversity, you'll find out which ones are more suited.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got the gentleman down just behind.
Thank you. This one's more to Judi and Terry with regards to you're leaving behind your 5 to 7 centimetres and then waiting for the regrowth, and regrowth being faster because you've left more matter behind. Is there a danger, we've been sampling on our farm of grazing it, and we've gone beyond 5 down to 3, then we've left some higher. The ones left higher have regrown more, but they've got a lot more yellow and dead and beneath. Can you explain that? Is that a problem or not a problem?
My response to that would be the problem is insufficient stock density or not enough paddocks. The higher the stock density, or the more paddocks, the more animals in a mob, then you'll get a much more even utilisation of the whole area, regardless. And the other important thing I think to consider with stock density is that not every plant has to be eaten. That they'll actually be impacted physically with a higher density of stock in any particular mob. So, I mean, they're always going to selectively graze, but the higher the density, the more even that utilisation will be, and you'll minimise those sorts of issues.
The issue of the yellowings come in the area that's got away from them, you're saying, versus the average of the paddock.
The flags got away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you're saying part of the paddock's got away, which has got the dead in the bottom, because it's not been grazed evenly everywhere. So,
the again, stock density, or if you're worried about those larger tussocks, then you can always go to the tractor if you've got one available, and the slasher. But it's I think an issue with selective grazing, and you can address it with actually increasing the stock density.
I think it also can be a function of different species. So they'll they'll graze different species at different times. But one of the things about regenerative agriculture generally is it's not as tidy as conventional agriculture. Be prepared for it to look untidy. And I like to see a lot of that stuff left, because when you get to winter, or particularly the next spring, you need roughage. Those animals need roughage. And some of those plants that you didn't graze previously are the roughage that helps them do a better job on animal performance when they hit the next rapid growth period. So I actually like to see stuff that's not grazed, that's left, that lignifies or, is left and stemmy. Very, very useful at a different time of the year.
Thank you. I was looking for that evenness and tidy with a big mob going in and thinking it was going to be evened out. And then there's also the boom and bust. We had like a dark, wet winter and we went really low everywhere. And one paddock that we didn't go low on, it's boomed and it's way ahead. It's like, oh, so I can see the value in that, but I'm like, well, how could we have made that through the whole farm? It just boom, and now we've got grass everywhere.
Yeah, it's stocking rate to carrying capacity. So if you had a really wet winter or a cold winter, you weren't producing the same amount of feed, then the stocking rate needed to match that productivity. And then you destock, and then you hit a really good spring, and you don't have enough animals. That's just part of life. And what you don't eat in that spring can take you through summer, and some of that can still be there later on when you need the roughage. So it's, I think, my view is don't try and just keep it all mowed like a lawn all the time, and be prepared for it to look untidy.
Thank you.
Just personally, I've heard a lot of people in WA using sacrificial paddocks through summer because of that exact issue that you were mentioning then, how you're having to graze through the autumn and you're probably overgrazing through that stage. Instead of doing that, having a sacrificial paddock where you're feeding them hay or grain, and then that lets your paddocks get away. And I know it's not exactly 100% regenerative, but unless you're buying and selling, sometimes that's the only way through 6 months of drought that we have some summers.
Could I just say that you don't have 6 months of drought, you just have an extended season. Yeah, I can talk a lot more about drought, but I won't.
But that's also where the grazing plan and the feed budgeting comes in. So you actively plan to build up a body of feed through the active growing season to actually ration out, for want of a better term, to plan the graze and ration out over the non-growing season. Because the thing that has staggered me is the number of people that actually feed hay over the summer and end up with bare paddocks at the end of March. And so if you actively plan the grazing so that you can manage that that boom time to actually ration out that extra feed, so your hay shed is in the paddock.
Hello. We tried high density grazing about 4 years ago, and we found a significant loss. We managed the pasture by visual monitoring, and we found a significant loss in daily weight gain. We've got a beef herd, and this was specifically an F1 mob, and the babies, their weight gain, when we put them into a large mob, it seemed to be the social interactions and the pecking orders of the lead cows and everything. That was a real concern for them, and we noticed a dramatic loss in the daily weight gain. So we sort of pulled up and we made our mobs smaller. So instead of being 100 cow-calf units, we've gone to 60, which then has affected, like we've had to rearrange our our grazing system. But we'd really like to have larger mobs to get that benefit from the high density system as you would. Either that or we've got to make our paddocks smaller again, which is very time consuming.
I would, when you get a problem like that, I'd start at the top and say, where was the planning, the monitoring and the managing? So how was the feed budgeting and how was the stocking rate matched to carrying capacity? Because when stocking rate exceeds carrying capacity, that's where you get the biggest impact on animal performance. I can guarantee you it's not the mob size that actually created that. It was lack of feed. And so that, to me, then comes back to the planning and the forward planning. And not just working on the number of cows, you've got to be the number of DSEs. Because as you know, that when cows calve, for example, the number of DSEs more than doubles. And so you've really got to do that. I would say you've just really, it comes back to stocking rate to carrying capacity. That's probably the principle there. And it won't be mob size that creates that.
My experience, and obviously it's not, I can't talk to your specific situation, but my experience is that when I saw situations where people were having issues with animal production, they were actually forcing animals through as well, so there was a stress associated with the moves. So rather than allowing animals to move freely through using low stress principles, if animals are being forced through paddocks on a regular basis or from paddock to paddock, then that can have an adverse effect. And the other thing, of course, is if you're either lambing ewes or calving cows, if they're not used to the program, in terms of frequent moves, then that can also be stressful, and particularly at times of calving or lambing. So, it might have been a time issue too. I'm not sure. There's always a multitude of factors to consider.
Question for you, Terry. You talked about the being able to predict droughts and that, and is that through your rolling rain averages, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so it's firstly, so we look at your carrying capacity in terms of DSE days per hectare per 100 mils of rainfall. So you establish what we call your benchmark carrying capacity. You've got to be careful if you've got a system propped up by grain or hay, that's not actually your carrying capacity. So you've got to look at what's it without props. So let's say you had a benchmark carrying capacity of 200 DSE days per hectare per 100 mils. On a grazing chart or in a spreadsheet, it's actually then a constant for 12 months period. And you challenge that every year, but let's look at it as a constant. Now, if the rain stops within the last 12 months or reduces, so we work on a 12-month running rainfall and a 12-month running total of stock days carried. So when you move forward every month, the rain that's actually affecting the feed you have there at the moment is what you've had in the last 12 months. And that's the same for every month. And also, the stocking rate is what you've had on for the last 12 months relative to that rainfall that you've had in the last 12 months. So when you're drawing a graph, if your stocking rate might have started at, say, 180 DSE days per hectare, and you'll be feeling very comfortable, and the rain turns off relative to when you had rain this time last year. The stocking rate measured in DSE days per hectare per 100 mils will start going up. And as it approaches, say, the 200 DSE days per hectare benchmark, then you need to start thinking about reacting, because the grazing chart and the stocking rate to carrying capacity is telling you that there's a problem on the way. And as Judi said earlier, the earlier you react to that, the less animals you actually have to take off, or, you know, one of the quick responses is actually weaning. Radical weaning or early weaning, if that's, if you're running ewes or cows, is the fastest way to halve your stocking rate. So if you let that stocking rate go up, let's say you let it go up to 250 as a stocking rate, so it's now well above your carrying capacity, you're now in debt. You're now drawing on the capital that's in your landscape. And you'll find you have to pay that back. It's like having to pay interest. To get that back down again, your stocking rate back down again to your carrying capacity, you might have to take a lot of animals off, but even when you do, it doesn't come back like that. It works its way back down. So 2 things affect the stocking rate relative to the carrying capacity. That's rainfall, and when it falls and how much, and the number of animals that you're actually running. It's a really simple equation, simple thing to run, but it's very, very powerful. So normally what we've found is you can get anywhere from 2 to 4 and maybe up to 8 weeks notice of a drought that everyone else is not seeing. And normally that gives you that time to get livestock off the place and sold before there's an impact on price. And you only need to be that 2 to 3 weeks in front of the crowd, and you're in front economically. It's a very, very powerful tool. The other thing is that often if you're coming out of a drought, you can get a lot of false starts. And so what the chart will tell you then is whether it's a false start or whether the drought's actually broken. So our rule of thumb is that until your rolling rainfall over 12 months exceeds your long-term average, you are not out of a drought. And it saves a lot of false starts and going and buying stock and then getting caught 3 months later.
But aside from the economic costs, with that concept of utilisation, if you overutilise at any time in a 12-month period, you pay for that overutilisation in the year that it happens or at the time it happens, but you will pay for it for at least another 12 months subsequently. So the environmental and ecological cost is probably much, much greater than the economic cost of keeping those animals.
I always say that there's always going to be a cost in a drought. And as a manager, your job is to restrict it to a financial cost. So a drought can create a significant cost in the landscape, as Judi just mentioned, in the future capacity of that landscape. It can produce a significant cost in terms of animal performance and animal suffering, and therefore price suffering. It can produce a significant cost in terms of the people running the business. Your job as a manager is to ensure that the only cost that a drought costs you is economic. That make sense?
We have another question down the front here. Before we get to that question, Nick, I'd like to ask you, you talked a lot about, from my understanding, you jumped into a transition phase really quickly. Can you chat about what that did for your business model and how that affected your business financially?
Did horrible things. We turned off the tap to synthetic fertilisers, chemicals over a very short space of time, and it's not something I would necessarily recommend. We made changes very quickly for various reasons, and I'm glad that we've done that because I'm extremely happy with where we are now and where we're going. But I would recommend incremental changes. I think that's a sensible thing to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've heard quite a lot about the benefits of grass-fed beef, but you know the basic point, I suppose, really is that a lot of grass-fed beef is quite variable compared with feedlot beef as far as quality goes, tenderness, all that sort of thing. What's your thoughts on the best way to use the tools of grazing management to ensure the best quality beef that we can produce?
Who was that question to, Jim?
Whoever's got the knowledge.
So let me see if I can paraphrase the question then. It was,
Yeah.
how do you use grazing management to improve the quality of livestock?
You've got frequency of moves, for example.
Yep.
Stage of growth of the plant, all these sort of variables. And because really I think this is something we've got to focus a lot on if we're going to push the grass-fed beef product. And I think grazing management is a tool that we've got to get really good at in order to achieve it.
I think we've got to get good at grazing management to achieve all sorts of things. I'm still not sure what your question was. I really didn't quite grab it.
If I could just make a really quick comment on that, I think I caught a little bit of that. From a practical sense, we're selling our steers while they're still in the paddock. They're being bought, and some they're not quite ready yet. So from a quality perspective, I'm moving some of those animals onto a pasture that's going to lay down, fat, finish them as quickly as I can to get that quality to where I need it to be. So that's a really, I guess, basic answer to your question.
One of the other practical things is that you need negotiable animals in a system, particularly with our climate. So that and those negotiable animals might be somebody else's. So that if the tap turns off and you need to destock, for example, you might not want to get rid of your best ewes or your best cows. So you've got to set, your the number of ewes or cows you get to the sort of where you think you can cut off your reduction in animal numbers, but there are animals that you're happy to get rid of regardless of whether they're ready or not. And as I say, they don't need to be yours, and they could be trade animals, they could be yours, or they could be somebody else's. But I think we've got to have negotiable animals, and we've got to have animals that we know are there to go when we have to change stocking rate.
If I could just add one more quick thing to that. I think we spoke about the need for change in a whole lot of areas yesterday afternoon, but one of the things that has confused me is the saleable animal is 3 score with 17 mils of fat, and then it goes to the butcher and they cut most of the fat off. So I don't know why we need to be selling or aiming to have a saleable animal that looks the same, with 3 or 4 score and so many mils of fat, when you can have a perfectly healthy product that is not so overweight.
We're at 12:30 now. We had 2 questions. Is everyone happy to do another couple of questions? Yeah, the questions are starting to come in now, but yeah.
Hello. So I'm wondering about best practice on a small scale. So if you've only got 2 hectares, are you still better off dividing that up into 4 little paddocks and only having 3 sheep running through?
Or 14.
Or 14. Exactly, yeah. So what's better for them as far as, stress at being in a smaller herd? Or I don't know much about livestock. I'm entering into it, so that's my question.
I would just say the principles apply across the board, whether you've got 2 hectares or 20 or 20,000. It's the same principles. You're managing that interaction between plant, soil and animal.
So split them up then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, one more question if we can.
Oh, just slipped in, thank you. So my question is to do with the winter feed gap and the protein for the winter feed gap. So lignified grass, I'm just wondering the comparison between if you make silage when the grass is green and has protein the difference between what is the value of maybe cutting silage when you've got a lot of grass that grows very fast during the summer and you're always trying to keep it in the growing phase rather than getting it into the lignified phase, which it goes very quickly. What are your thoughts about silage in order to fill that winter gap?
I think it firstly depends on whether you've got C3s or C4 grasses. If you've got C3s, then I think silage is an option. If you've got C4s, I wouldn't bother because the quality just won't be there, and I think you've got mostly C4s. So, I think it's horses for courses. There certainly are places where silage is a really good option, and there's places where it's just wasting your time.
The other thing, of course, is to wait. I mean, every situation is different, and whether or not you've got the equipment to actually make that silage or actually purchase it. But weighing up the cost of going through that process against feeding some sort of bypass protein, so that will encourage the utilisation of that feed by those animals, or. And I don't like to say it, but urea is probably the cheapest option in terms of feeding nitrogen to enhance the intake of that lower quality feed. So there's a whole raft of feed options. Some will be more palatable than others depending on your goals and your livestock and the production goals as well, Rach.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I'd like to invite you to talk to the presenters over lunch if you've got some burning questions that you didn't get an opportunity to ask. But if you could help me in thanking them for their time and their wisdom.